Dr. Niall Downey from Ireland. He'll be our first speaker. I'm co-moderating today. I'm Michael Adelaide, and this is Kate Hanneman from University of Toronto. I'm from Brown, and let's go ahead and get started, please.
Presentations like me, it doesn't do mornings. There's a QR code there as well. It'll take you to a link to my contact details and a few other things you might find interesting as well. It's easier than writing everything down. So my background is I'm an airline captain with Aer Lingus. I fly Airbus A330s transatlantic every week. Before that, I was a cardiothoracic surgeon. And last year, or a couple of years ago now, during COVID, obviously it was very quiet in the airline industry. Volunteered back into healthcare. They said, no, we don't need any help. And so I wrote a book. So there's a book now as well, so you can access that. It's on Barnes & Noble. So healthcare has a problem. Adverse events have been one of the biggest issues in healthcare for quite a few years now. And the underlying problem is actually quite simple, but healthcare hasn't dealt with it. Aviation has. Our brains are still running on Caveman Software, but we're trying to operate in a 21st century environment with very high-tech environments, very high-tech components, and our brains haven't actually evolved to keep up. We've been evolving for 200,000 years. The last 100 years, there's been a huge acceleration, and our brains haven't evolved to keep up with that. So that's the underlying problem with why we are having these adverse events. So to give you an example, our brains don't actually think the way we think we think. So when you look at that screen, how many black dots can you see? There's 12 there. How many can you actually see? Okay, your brain can only see a certain amount at any one time. As you move your eye across the screen, you keep seeing black dots popping up and disappearing. Okay, when you're looking at an X-ray, the same thing's happening. So unless you're looking at it in a very focused, structured way, you're actually going to miss stuff. Again, our brains see what they think they see. So do you see a rock flying through the air? Okay, it's not actually a rock sitting in a lake, but your brain sees what it thinks it sees, and then processes from that. So again, you'll see examples in a minute now of how people looked at X-rays and saw what they expected to see, and it's not actually what was there at all. Perspective. You can see there we're looking down 3D tunnels, down corridors. Your brain's turning around and it's seeing down the next corridor. Except that it's not. Okay, your brain sees patterns. It doesn't actually see what's there. It sees what it thinks is there and then constructs it. So when you're looking at an X-ray, you have to keep that in mind. You're not actually seeing what you think you see, so you can be very easily misled. So that's led to adverse events. So how big a problem have we got? This is Marty McCarry from Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. He did a study back in 2016 and reckoned that in the States, adverse events, so mistakes due to human errors, misinterpretations, misdiagnosis, and so on, was the third biggest killer behind cancer and heart disease. I trained in the NHS and in the Irish health system. The NHS did a study about the same time, 2015, and they found basically the exact same results. So 10% of all hospital admissions have an adverse event, and between 3 and 7% of them, it's serious enough that it actually causes their death. Ireland did a similar study in 2016. If you go online, there's 50 years worth of these studies from every country in the world, and everybody's getting the same results. And the really scary bit is that there's been absolutely no progress in the last 50 years. The Irish study showed the exact same results as everybody else, and to put the numbers in context, this is what I fly across the Atlantic. It's an Aer Lingus Airbus A330. It holds 317 passengers. Now, Chicago's got a population of about 3 million. If you work through those numbers and work out the number of deaths that adverse events or human errors actually causing, Chicago O'Hare is having an A330 crash with everybody on board killed once a month, every year. And we're not really addressing it. Human factors is the underlying problem. So what about radiology? Have you guys got an issue? So they did a study in Mass General a few years ago. They got people to read an abdominal CT scan, and then they got their colleagues to reread it to see did they agree. So 30% of you disagreed with your colleagues on one scan. Now the interesting bit is that they actually gave some people their own scan back. 25% of the time they disagreed with themselves. So globally, there's about 1 billion radiological images taken annually. That's probably increasing. These figures are going up all the time. And your lowest estimate is a 4% error rate. Now, I've seen 15, 20% error rates quoted. So we'll give you the benefit of the doubt. 4% error rate. So that means there's a minimum of 40 million errors per year. And that's giving you a bit of leeway. So what sort of mistakes are we making? So there's two big types. Perceptual, so not seeing things, and cognitive, misinterpreting them. So for an example, under-reading is 42%. Now again, back to our caveman. So you're out hunting in the savannah, trying to find some food, and you manage to trap an antelope, and you've now got dinner for you and your family for the next couple of days. So do you then go and chase another antelope? No, you've got what you need, so you take the antelope and you go home. So the same thing happens in radiology. I'll show you an example in a minute. And then satisfaction of search. Again, you know what you're looking for, you found it, so great, we're done, and you don't bother looking around at anything else. So here's an example. Patient with lymphoma, just finished chemotherapy. So what's the first thing in your head? Tumours, metastases, secondaries. So they read the scan, and they saw some abnormalities, and thought, okay, so it's secondaries. And they actually, so they went and then took bone biopsies, got very invasive, and turned out it's not, it's just bog standard compression fractures, but people saw what they expected to see. I'll give you another example of that. Can you all see the rectangles? How many circles can you see? There's 16 circles there. Can you see them? I don't think I've got a pointer, but if you look up in between, says you get your rectangles going across. Look at the wee space between each rectangle horizontally, where the vertical lines are. There's your circle. And the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and down the next line. There's 16 of them there. But your brain doesn't see it because it expected to see rectangles, then it stopped looking. So how does that apply in radiology? Here's a CT scan. So you can see there's a tumour in the right upper lobe of the lung. So the radiologist went looking. They thought there was going to be a tumour. They went looking and they found it. Great. We've caught the antelope. Dinner's set for the next few days. Let's go home. And if they looked a bit more carefully, when you go over to the left-hand side, there's a second tumour there, the second primary. But that was missed because Caveman Software teaches us to survive. You found what you wanted to do. You've achieved your goal. You go home now. Okay, so that's the problem, and that's how big a deal it is. Chicago, we're crashing on A330 once a month because of this type of stuff, and we're not really doing anything about it. So this is where pilots come in. We had the same problem about 50 years ago, and the Tenerife disaster changed everything for us. So in some ways, we do similar work to yourselves. We look at screens and try and interpret what's there. That's me heading down over the Pyrenees in the south of France, and there's a series of thunderstorms in front of me. You guys don't get the luxury of having a second guess. On daytime flights, I can look out the window, and there's the thunderstorms. On a nighttime flight, you're trying to rely on what you see on the screen. Now, a lot of our psychology and the way we think is also very transferable to yourselves, and that's what I've been trying to get across for about the last 13 years now. Now, pilots tend to get a bad rap. Okay, they think that we haven't an awful lot to contribute to healthcare, but we actually have. The biggest thing is our approach is that we assume that error is nothing to be ashamed of. We take it for granted. Our culture is different. We expect things to go wrong, so we have a just culture. You can put your hand up and admit to them without any disciplinary action or any dismissal. Our systems approach, we look for what went wrong instead of who went wrong. We don't blame people. And CRM is the way we teach people to think. So CRM means we accept error as normal. The systems, we look for the tripwires in the system and we try and engineer them out. And the CRM then allows us to train staff to manage error. So does it work? Here's the number of accidents and incidents in healthcare, or in aviation rather, for the last century. So if you go from left to right, you can see a steady climb all the way up to the 70s, a bit of a blip for the Second World War, and a steady drop-off ever since. And there's the number of deaths, the exact same pattern. Steady climb till the late 70s, and then a drop-off ever since. Now, in the late 70s, there was 3,000 deaths per year. Aviation's gone up about 9-fold since that, so there should be about 30,000 deaths per year in aviation if we followed that trend. We've actually about 1,000. So that's a 97% improvement. You guys have flatlined. So in CRM, there's different angles. They all actually overlap. I'll just very briefly look at communication, because that accounts for about 70% of incidents in healthcare and aviation and all the other safety critical industries. Again, communication should be very easy. You just say what you think and people understand. But again, Caveman Software, people see what they think they see and hear what they think they hear. It's very easy to misinterpret things. In X-rays, you are very big at taking scans from a couple of different angles. That looks very, very dangerous. If you look at it from another angle, she's about 3 feet off the ground. Okay, so it's very easy to get misled when you see things. So when you see things on a scan, always think, where can this go wrong? Like, what's plan B here? Your world's very different to mine. This is your world. If you're trying to give a steroid injection and you're rushing around, it's 4 o'clock in the morning, you're knackered tired, you haven't eaten, you haven't slept, what's the chances of you taking the wrong one? Okay, that's your world. Our world's totally different. Again, I was a cardiac surgeon. We would have people on renal dialysis. So there's 2 bags of renal dialysis fluid. Now, obviously, one of the biggest things is make sure the potassium levels are correct. If you get them wrong, the patient arrests on you and you're in big trouble. The bag on the left's got twice as much potassium as the bag on the right. And what's the chances of spotting that at 4 in the morning? And the company actually say it's very clear. They've got a 4 up in the top and a 2 on the other one, and they actually write it again down in the bottom corner. They've got 4 millimoles versus 2 millimoles. Okay, that's the world you live in. This is the world I live in. So what do you think that lever does? That's how simplistic we make it. When I came in the land yesterday, I grabbed the lever with the 2 wheels on it, and I put it down. That's a $240 million airplane. That's how simplistically we think compared to the way you guys think. And we're constantly changing things. You guys have flatlined for 50 years. I've been talking to people for about 13 years now, and I've made very little progress on any of this. So basically, the take-home message is that aviation has solved this problem already. So we've got a huge problem, adverse events due to human error. It's got huge implications. 10% of a country's budget gets squandered on costs due to adverse events. Now, in a small country like Ireland, that's €2 billion a year. That's a huge amount of money. And aviation's got a solution to it. And it's basically addressing the Caveman Software approach. If you expect to make mistakes, learn where the problems are and learn to address them. So again, there's the QR code again. They take you to my details, and there's a shameless promo for the book as well. It's available on Barnes & Noble and online. Okay, so thanks for your attention. Hope you found that helpful.
Thank you so much, one, for joining us. That was a fantastic perspective. We do have time for questions. If you have any, please come up to the podium. And if not, or while people are thinking, I have a question for you. You know, from your perspective, obviously, with a background in medicine, having trained, and then now your current role, you know, what do you think the single most important thing, or the one thing we could do in medicine or in radiology would be to address this?
Acknowledge that you have a problem. Simple as. People haven't really addressed this. There's a lot of studies being done, usually quality improvement studies, which are tinkering around the edges. Nobody's actually addressing the problem. That what's actually going on is the thought processes, the whole mental models are wrong. Once we can address that, everything else falls into place. Most of the stuff that I've seen is just window dressing and candy floss.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much. If you have any questions, please feel free to come up afterwards. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Bettina Stewart, who will be speaking on human factors in radiology. Welcome.